Welcome to the channel map for March of 2021. This here is where I'm going to tell you about all my plans. But first we got to look at February of this year and see how that's gone, because quite a lot of things have happened, not all according to plan, as usually is the case around these parts. In February, we continued our CSGO casting stint with Squid, casting ESEA Premier. It's actually been pretty nice, the fact that I've been able to see day on day, week on week improvement, and of course, should I ever go back and look at the EDC broadcasts from January, I'm pretty sure I would just cringe uncontrollably, and that is the sign of improvement, which I'll have more to say on a little bit later in another video. I also saw the return of regular mod streams, which took a little bit of a sort of a divot, we'll say. On top of that, we saw fraud streams come back to some form of consistency, at least once a week, usually twice. That should continue into the foreseeable future, my schedule willing. There was the Hydra AI rewrite that is still actually going on as we speak, but a lot of work was done on it in the month of February, and the AI is now in a significantly better position than it ever was before. Obviously, we also were working on the campaign's planning and concepts. We started doing those polls, for example, and we generally had a gay old time working on many different aspects of Hydra. Obviously, we did some work on the mod, we did some balance patches as well, so things are generally progressing, even if we weren't able to extend nearly as many things as I initially expected in the month of February, mostly because iQuare was a little bit under the weather towards the tail end of the month, and otherwise we've just been busy individuals over in the Frauds Club. So, jumping straight into the Let's Play recap, we obviously did Genesis Rising as a one and done, Age of Empires 1 and 2, Deus Ex Human Revolution, and I believe that's all of them. That should cover pretty much everything. There was the attempt to do Homeworld, but I couldn't capture it on OBS, so I'll probably have to install some shitty version if I want to, and at that point, why would I ever play a shitty version, like the remaster, for example, that just breaks stuff. So not going to bother doing that. If I can find a way to get the original version working with OBS capture, then whoopee, kudos to me. I'm sure it will, it'll go out great. I'm sure it won't be a waste of my time, just like all of the other games that I've been playing lately have been. Hey, at least we did multiple videos of Age of Empires 1. Every other series there, not so much. So aside from that, Elo Heaven over on the second channel has been continuing, and we didn't do any interviews. Maybe the James Banks one was in February. I can't quite remember. But obviously the interviews themselves have slowed a little bit. It's almost expected, because at some point you run out of people to interview, and at least people that you yourself have a really strong connection to and want to interview, while at the same time, the people who might be really interesting to interview just don't respond to you just yet, so you need to get bigger in the space kind of deal. That's what I'm finding anyway. So I'm just going to come back to those whenever the guests are available and interested. There's been quite a few back and forths, but we have failed to schedule anything specific just yet, so time will tell with that one. But I'm quite excited to get in the thick of it with a lot of these would-be interviewees, I'll say. And so hopefully that continues in the month of March, or at the very least in the very near future. Now we can talk about March's plans a little bit more in depth, and we'll start with the RTS plans. Yes, that's right. So obviously I talked about Nemesis map development. I was very vague with what that Nemesis project could or would be in the month of February when I was doing my February channel map. That map has slowed, we'll say, because I've been working on a lot of the engine level things, trying to assist iQuare in that department to raise things like the unit limit and the bullet limit and things of that nature. And essentially we haven't moved too much in terms of the dial in that respect. So until that dial moves, and until we get, filling that progress bar up, so to speak, and get those extenders up and running, there's not really much of a point in making a map that's as large scale as that. So I'll probably defer to smaller scale operations, such as the early levels of this campaign that we're working on, instead of worrying too much about the Nemesis map development. That being said, there's still plenty of things that I could do, so maybe there are things that I will do in the month of March, but either way, that probably won't be publicated, because I would like to keep that map under wraps until the time comes. That being said, obviously Brood War engine updates and extensions are still very much on the table, and still very much something that iQuare and Veek and myself want to implement. as we are essentially the trio in terms of code base. Obviously, Milestone and Tudeman were helping out where they had the availability as well, so maybe they'll actually come back now that there's a little bit less crazy shit going on in the terms of higher education, where people were obviously busy with finals and whatnot during the month of February. So we should see more development in that respect, but I don't know by how much, and obviously those individuals may have been busy for completely unrelated reasons. I'm just assuming it was related to education. I could be completely wrong. So yeah, who knows what's going to happen there, but it'll be lovely to have them back whenever they want to. And at that point, we'll have quite a lot of work to get done. So aside from that, in terms of the RTS engine, the new engine, the custom engine, we're going to be looking into graphics APIs, GPU APIs, a lot of letters. And the goal is to settle on one definitively. It seems like we're going to be using OpenGL, but it does also seem like the OpenGL is a pretty big piece of shit, to be honest. So I'm hoping that we can find something, especially if we're not looking for cross-platform and we only want to support Windows, then I don't really see why we would need to use something like that if there's a superior Windows allowing alternative available. But that's just something else that we need to have a broader conversation about amongst the designer crew. And once we agree on some tenets, some core qualities that we want to see out of one of these APIs, that point can be sort of debated and figured out, and we can move on from there. That being said, there's still plenty of other opportunities here to get more RTS development done, but for the most part, I've been working in the theoretical department, planning out the data structures, and we've agreed to use Go as, for now anyway, as a sort of replacement for C++, in fact, to write the new engine functionality in that respect. So that'll be really interesting to see if that's even feasible, right? In some ways experimental, but it should be fine, according to what Viek tells me. So I'm willing to defer to his wisdom in this respect. And then back to Brood War, of course, in terms of mapping, there is the mapping tutorial series. That is still underway. I did not forget about it. I've actually been working on it over the past, I guess we could say, a couple of weeks. It's not a magnum opus video or anything, but it should be solid enough. And I just want to make sure that I dedicate the proper amount of time to making it good. So the first one will come out, and that'll be the creation of a 1v1 map. Then there will be a 2v2 map, and I should be able to actually get those out this month because I'm going to be making some changes to my schedule to better afford proper time for some of the more important things in life, such as making YouTube videos. You see, that is very important. So you can expect more of those in general. Obviously, the melee maps I would like to have more of, regardless of whether or not they're connected to a YouTube video for educational purposes. I think it would make sense for me to make some more 3v3 and 4v4 maps, just because that seems to be an area where we are lacking. In the month of February, I reinvented Kakadu Port quite heavily, although it still doesn't resolve some core spacing issues with that particular map. It is significantly better than it used to be, so I want to try and use that plus the lessons I learned from making my 2v2 map Parabola to essentially create some very high quality work coming out in the 3v3 and 4v4 space. So hopefully we can slot in some more maps for that kind of thing. Even though in theory, the tournament that we're talking about holding some point, hopefully in Q2 at the very latest, would be something to the effect of a 2v2 tournament. So it wouldn't really make sense to play on 3v3 or 4v4 maps necessarily, but I'll have some other ideas. Maybe it will make sense. I'll just leave that one to percolate in your brain. Campaign planning and mapping is pretty much the last Brood War plan. Obviously, it's for the Hydra campaign. I'm very much looking forward to getting started on not only the mapping, but really dig deep and start planning out the plot a little bit more in more detail, in greater detail. I need to figure out essentially the end state for, at the end of the campaign, where do I roughly want to see all the characters and all the factions, and then I can figure out how organic and realistic is that ending compared to where we start, because I kind of know where we start, generally speaking. So that will allow me to allow the story to write itself for the most part, and then I can sort of make judgment calls where maybe something is a bit more of a coin flip in terms of what could be the outcome. Obviously, with deference to the idea that for the majority of the missions, you're probably going to be successful in some capacity as whatever you're playing as in order to attain victory. So yeah, I've already got some ideas for that. Obviously, story framing could allow you to succeed in punching a hole through a blockade so you can escape. And then the consolidated military power is still actually your enemy in that respect. But we still want to make sure that it's very clear in terms of gameplay communication, in terms of what the gameplay tells you as far as the story goes. We need to make sure that that is in line with the actual story. So there's a lot to consider there, but I'm pretty confident in my abilities to tell a competent story, and it'll be a very splendid learning experience nonetheless pretty much regardless of what the outcome is. Even if it ends up being terrible, at least it's something that I will be learning from, much like in Consummate, right? Going over to the first channel plans, Crow Pills, and lots of them. I'm actually not sure how many we'll have there, but the most recent one that I did about Blizzard felt really good to put together, and I have a decent formula, I think, for recreating that. Whenever there's a news story that pertains to the gaming industry or developing software or whatever, and it's something that I feel relatively strongly about, pretty sure I'll be doing that. AI castovers, yeah, those are coming back. They didn't quite win out on the poll that I put out most recently, but most people voted for something that they didn't do. They said something else and then didn't comment what else they wanted. So unless they expected me to read their mind through the internet, I assume that's just a troll. We can, sort of move on from that. But AI castovers will be coming back for Hydra, particularly since we were able to solve some stability issues in the month of February, which I didn't really touch on too heavily in my recap. But yeah, considering that's the case, I'm much less likely to crash now. Pretty nice, pretty epic. We'll go ahead and use that to generate some more videos, spread the word about Hydra a little bit better. And of course, the mapping tutorial series already touched on that. LPs themselves will take a bit of a back seat, but I will be tackling BioShock Infinite actually very soon. So you keep your eyes peeled for that particular title. Who knows how good or not it will be. First impressions, I don't know. Not great, but we'll see. Second channel. Let's talk second channel. The casting is continuing as my main focus alongside Elo Heaven. Those two pieces of content, shall we say, are very important for my personal growth, and I really like the dynamic that Elo Heaven has got. I feel like it's turning into a very solid talk show in general. So continuing that, and we're going to open up March with a banger of an episode. I'm quite happy with that, so we will continue developing that. Technically, we opened up March with Alan Hender, obviously, but considering the next guest that we have in line, let's just say you're not going to want to miss that, even if you're not a huge follower of Counter-Strike. Moving away from that, we have, of course, the idea of Semi-Pro, the interview series. Still plenty that are in the works in terms of my Twitter DMs and stuff, but hopefully we have some more, or any at all, in the month of March. That would be nice. Pros and Cons. That's the name of the new series that's going to be a bit of a solo video content, similar to Thorin's Thoughts, where I'm going to be sort of taking what the video title implies. I'm going to be having a point that I'm debating and then try to maybe steelman it in the middle of it, right? So maybe the point that I have in mind is, for example, a recent roster move that happened was Kenny S leaving G2. And maybe my point is actually this is a good move for both parties because G2 can be better without Kenny S and Kenny S can be better without G2. So I'll want to steelman the opposition and then break it down, essentially. And that's kind of what I'm modeling the pros and cons approach with. It's not just arguing for my point, but successfully arguing against a well-articulated version of the counterpoint. And hopefully I can make that happen. It's obviously a bit of a more involved process than you might think just talking into a webcam normally ends up being, but that's the plan. In the more far distant future, there's obviously the second phase of the mapping tutorial series where I'll work on like campaigns or map sets or whatever. Aside from that, obviously I had in Consummate Map 1 here for a while. I had video essays for a while. I still do plan on doing all of that stuff, but I figure why even note it since it's just becoming like a running gag almost that I'm consistently putting that in the future plans section. So yeah, is it really any surprise? Not quite. Hopefully nothing else in this video was terribly surprising to you, but still got you excited for the future content to come. And obviously, if you were one of the people who voted in that poll something else and didn't comment it, well, kiss my fist, homie.